Hi everyone, today with Mark from KPMG and David from the Databricks team, and they're going to talk about GenAI for finance and audit and how to get to production. So Mark, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your role?
Yeah, thanks, Lara. So, I'm Mark Wallington. I am a partner with KPMG, and I lead on AI for our audit practice in the UK. Maybe just quickly on KPMG for those not familiar. So, we are one of the so-called Big Four professional services firms. We have about 275,000 employees globally. We split our business into advisory, tax, and legal, who support companies through a whole range of issues, and then our audit business, which is where I sit. And within audit, our role is really to provide independent assurance over the financial results of public and private companies. So that's really, are the numbers that those companies report to stock markets, to investors, are they a true and fair reflection of that company's performance? And we do that for some of the largest companies in the world. But my role, really, as not an accountant in that audit practice, but my role is to bring technology and data to that audit work that we do, to make it more insightful, to make it more efficient, and to make it really robust and high quality. So that's what I do.
Awesome, thank you. And so can you tell us a bit more about this particular use case?
Yeah, absolutely. So a company's financial report, or the annual report, as we sometimes refer to it as, that's really the key document and the key set of information that we as KPMG are providing assurance over. That's what we sign our name to. But before we sign our name, one of the really important checks that we do is to make sure that everything that should be included in that report is actually there. So we do a completeness check over that information, and we use a checklist to do that. And that's driven by legal requirements and regulations that companies need to abide by. Typically, that checklist has over 1,000 questions in it for a typical listed company. And then we also assess whether the report is presenting that fair and balanced view of a company's performance in the past year. So is it realistic? Is it fair? And these documents, these annual reports that we're checking, these are really quite complex documents. For a large listed business, that report can be anything from 500 plus pages long. They've got long bodies of text set out often in columns that spill over pages. They've got infographics, they've got charts, they've got images, they've got complex tables, kind of you name it. It's got it in that document, and it's all kind of mixed in together. And then to make that more complex for us, every company that we audit does that in a slightly different way. There's no single standard format for these documents. So for our auditors, even an experienced auditor, to do those 1,000+ checks on one of those complex documents, that can take them days or sometimes even weeks of effort to get that done. So for us, there was a big opportunity here to create a solution that would assist our auditors in being much more efficient when they were doing that work. And we kind of used an analogy to describe it, that doing that work today, it's a little bit like driving an old car. It passes its safety test. It gets us from A to B, but it's probably not the most comfortable ride that's out there. So what we've tried to do, and working with Databricks, is to build a brand new AI-powered engine for that car. So it's a much better experience for our people, and we can get from A to B much more quickly than we could in the past.
Super impressive, especially in a highly regulated industry. We'll get back to that afterwards. First, could you explain about did you build the solution? What is the architecture? And also, David, when you run through the architecture, can you also start by presenting yourself and your role at Databricks?
Sure. Yes. So I'm David. I work in professional services at Databricks as a data scientist and resident solution architect. And I've been working with Mark and the team on this use case. And we can have a look at the architecture. Let me share this. Okay. So this is just a high level view of the user journey, basically. And what I think I want to outline here as well is that when we started to build this, our goal for this first version, so to say, was to actually build the what we call the AI engine on Databricks, right? So we wanted to focus on really delivering something that is robust and accurate, and that we can deliver quickly at the same time. So we didn't want to focus our time and effort on building a front end or a UI for the first version. We really wanted to focus on the accuracy and the engine itself. So that's why we decided to well, for the user journey to use components that are already in use at KPMG that we can leverage and where we don't have to build anything from scratch, which is why the user journey for this first version starts in a service management tool, tools like Jira Service Management or ServiceNow, right? And so any user that wants an analysis to be run on their audit engagement, like that would be typically an audit team, right? That has to work on an audit for a specific client. They would go into that tool and create a request. And the first thing is an onboarding request, and that would then trigger some automation that actually creates the underlying resources in Databricks and in Unity Catalog, where we can store the data. Again, like you mentioned that already, this is a highly regulated industry, so there's a lot of focus on governance and data governance. So that's the first step, and then they would actually do the actual analysis request, and that's where they upload the client report, the checklist that Mark mentions, which has these 1,000 questions or even more than that. And then they also have the ability to upload prior year reports or other reports that they want to run a comparison against. If we think about if the report is fair and balanced, like how did it look like in the last year, or really to compare. So that option they have. So they upload all these documents to that ticket, submit it, and that will then trigger the entire analysis job on Databricks. So that will upload the files to Databricks and then trigger the data preparation, the actual inference. Yeah, the analysts and outputs are then created and delivered in Unity Catalog, and then the results are exposed through a Power BI dashboard. So that's the very high level. And if we then
So David, one question. So in the analysis request, so can they send or upload any number of documents from any of these kind of three things you are saying, like here, report, checklist, or comparison report? So it can be
yes,
any
they can.
number of
In principle, they can. Yes, it's like
Mm.
the workflow is designed to be scalable, and they could upload different types of checklists together with well, there would naturally be one current year report, right? But then you could have several checklists, or you could upload several comparison reports.
And what is the format of these files? Is it like Excel, CSVs?
Yes, so the reports are PDF,
Mm.
and the checklist that depends on like what audit team we work with. Like there are different firms, but in the country in the UK, that's usually one type of checklist, and that's structured data. So, but well, I would say it's semi-structured, so we have to parse it, but we have like a custom logic to parse these checklists. Okay, and then if we just really zoom in on this Databricks part, and this is a bit of a busy diagram, but it's basically three parts that I want to call out here and that are important to focus on. The first one is, I mentioned that before, Unity Catalog. We're really dealing with like highly confidential data, right? So governance is a very, very big topic, and every client specific data goes into a specific catalog so that we can restrict the access tightly. So
so they are segregated on the Unity Catalog level.
Exactly. That would, as I said, that would be one of many, right? There could be many catalogs for each client.
And easy to delete if something needs to be dropped.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then we have one additional catalog just for the use case specific resources. And that's the models that we actually run. The AI models are governed in that catalog. We have vector search indexes, and then we have like the volume where we upload the initial, where basically the service management tool uploads the initial documents and where the ingestion then picks them up. So that's the Unity Catalog part. And then we have the actual job, right? The workflow that is being triggered once the ticket is submitted. And that has several tasks. Yeah, well, and this is pretty, like, you will realize this follows kind of a rack architecture. Well, it's pretty standard. So we do a data ingestion in the beginning. We just ingest these raw files. into a Delta table so that we can keep like the history over the different analyses for every client. So we keep track of over these. The second part is then the parsing of the actual documents, right? So we have different parsers prepared to be used for, again, for different checklists or for the different use cases. This semantic analysis, for example, uses a different parser than the checklist AI. One example is that we use GPT-4 like a multimodal language model to parse PDFs into markdown text. That's happening here. And then after parsing, we have to further process the text, right? So, and again, like that depends a little bit on the different features, but for the checklist AI part, so where we have to answer all these thousands of questions, where we use large language models, we have to include, well, this is basically a RAG architecture, as I mentioned. So we have to include a vector search index. We have to chunk the text into pieces that we can retrieve from there. And that's all happening here. The semantic analysis is basically, again, that's being used to identify like if the report is fair and balanced and so on. So we can determine the semantics of the different sentences. Are the sentences positive? Are they neutral rather, or are they negative? That's happening here. So we have to extract individual sentences from the parsed text. So that's all happening here. And again, like everything is being written back into Delta format, so we can keep track and manage this in a structured way on Unity Catalog in the client catalog. And then for checklist AI, as I mentioned, we actually load this into a vector database, the text chunks of the report, and then the final part is the actual batch inference. So we run then an inference over the report and the checklist to provide the output. And all this like leverages like a lot of the AI tools that come out of the box. We have the vector search endpoint that I already mentioned. So the vector search index is again managed through Unity Catalog, and it's just being synced into the vector search endpoint. These are the two models that we're using. The semantic model is a BERT-based model, and the checklist AI model is more like what you I guess call it an agent type of model, a compound AI system. And what we then do there is that we leverage Azure's OpenAI models, GPT-4o and GPT-4o Mini, for this through a gateway in Databricks, which is really makes it easy to use and switch different models because the interface doesn't change. We can apply load balancing and fallbacks and so on. And every request to this model sends then traces, so we can track the traces in MLflow. And that helps us with debugging. That's one thing. And with monitoring, these traces are very valuable to derive further insights and do monitoring later on. Right. Yeah. And for development, of course, we I guess we'll talk about that later, but we do a lot of evaluation, and part of that evaluation is to leverage LLM judges, which makes it easy to compare, for example, essay-based rationale and justifications to those that are coming as an output from our model. And yeah, just a final note, all of this is basically defined through, it's one project repository, right? But we use Databricks asset bundles to define the project end to end as code, more or less. So that's what this shows. One source file, actually we have several, but they're all sourced through this databricks.yaml. So we define all these tasks and jobs in here, and we define things like MLflow experiments or the models all through source files. And then we can simply deploy this through Databricks bundles. And that really helps if you're deploying into different environments, which we do, right? You have the development, staging, production environments, all with different configurations. And that's easy then to define through code here. So that's like a high level view of the architecture.
I think from my perspective, one of the things that really helped us with getting this up and running was the fact that so much of what we needed was available in Databricks out of the box. So we didn't have to spend a lot of time making decisions about different components of the architecture and where we got that from, and then provisioning those resources and stitching them together. And we could get all that from within the Databricks workspace. So then what we really focused on was actually solving the problem. How do we use those components in the best way to get the best output?
Cool. So then, Mark, I love this question because it makes us understand how do you map whatever you're building to the end user requirement. So the question is, how did you make sure the solution was aligned with the requirements of the people who are actually going to use the solution on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Well, we talked to them was the first step, and I mean that was really how this use case came about and was one that we prioritized. We run a summer training program every year for all of our auditors. Last year we put the question out there to people, if you could have an AI solution to solve one problem, what would you choose? And I think this was the overwhelming winner. Every auditor I speak to gets very excited about this solution because none of them really enjoy this part of the work. It's time consuming, it's manual, it's a really important step for us to do, but yeah, not the most enjoyable part of the job. So it was high on the list of people's priorities. But yeah, in terms of getting the requirements out, really understanding how were people doing it today, how did the process work today, what were those pain points in there, and getting kind of under the skin of that. No, not just, we don't like doing it and it takes a long time, but what actually is it that takes a long time? But I think the other bit we learned, and David may come onto this when we talk about evaluations as well, is actually we needed to find the right subject matter experts to talk to as well. Because again, when you're building this into an automated solution that we want to work in a consistent way, you lose some of that just inherent flexibility of a human doing it in a certain way, and each human doing that in a slightly different way. So really understanding what were the specific requirements to meet our methodology requirements and to meet our regulatory requirements, and to make sure it was being done in a really consistent and high quality way, but a way that teams could then pick up and start using it. And as David mentioned, we haven't focused on building a nice shiny user interface yet. That's the next steps that we're getting onto at the moment. We really wanted to prove out we could build an engine that worked better than the engine that we've got today before we put the nice chassis or bodywork around that. So we've had to do quite a lot with managing people's expectations as well, to say, look, that will come, but help us prove out the value of this first. So yeah, lots of back and forth dialogue.
So did you ever reach this point of actually trying to compare what you built versus exactly the steps a human would do and the outcome the human auditor would have from this?
Yeah, we've done a lot of that. I don't know, David, whether you wanted to pick up on evaluations and how we've gone through that.
Yeah, I guess we started to plan for evaluation right from the start, because I guess it's not a secret that this is one of the crucial but also most difficult parts to do. Just getting the data in the format and the quality that you need to do proper evaluation usually takes a lot of time and involvement from SMEs, right? So as I said, like the first POC, like the first internal version, was a pretty simple RAG-based architecture, as that was our baseline to start from. But then you really need proper evaluation data, right? Otherwise, you don't know where you are with your baseline. And it's really crucial to get that to then iterate and really understand, like, where should we focus our efforts and on improving this. So yeah, as Mark mentioned, we got help from audit SMEs there, and just in the beginning, we just got, like, I think 30 questions, because this is a lot of work, right? But even those 30 questions already helped us a lot, right? Because they were really high quality. We got the output is basically for each of these questions, you get like an answer, yes, no, or this question is not applicable for this type of report and engagement. But then in addition, you get a justification. Why do we think this is not, like, this disclosure has not been made, or why has it been made and where has it been made? And so that's one part. And then we get the citation from it, right? Which page is relevant here and so on. So all of that we need to actually evaluate. So that's a lot of work for SMEs to do. And in the beginning, as I said, we got these 30 questions, but that got us a long way, right? That really enabled us to see, okay, we have a problem with recall or with the retrieval from the vector store. Initially, we only had maybe 40% recall from our documents. So we could really focus our attention to that to bring this up, and that improved the quality and the accuracy quite a bit. And then it also allowed us then to really dive deep and see, okay, these type of questions, this is why we fail, stuff like that. And then over time we were able, now it's in limited deployment, right? We get more feedback, and we get more data. I think now I don't know, have the exact number, but now maybe we have like 300 questions as evaluation data, which makes our evaluation more robust and sets us up for further improvement.
So did you implement it any bespoke judges, like business specific judges, or only the out of the box evaluation judge?
So yeah, I mean, there are different parts, right? So evaluation, you can, like the first part is the document recall for retrieval. That's well defined. You don't judge for it. Then we have the answers, which yes, no, not applicable. That's just classification. So again, but well defined evaluation. But then the judges we applied to the justification. So we could, and that's just a correctness judge basically to the expected justification with the one that we provided from, or that the agent provided.
Amazing. Thanks, David. So yes, the evaluation is the key thing. And if you don't build this evaluation data set in the beginning, then you're just almost after start iterating. So Mark, so how did you manage to measure the ROI of this solution?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that we are in the early stages of that, and we're kind of building that understanding of the ROI as more and more of our teams and our people start to use it. Clearly, time saving is a big part of it, and that is something that we can measure compared to previous audit cycles. How long did it take with the tool in place? How long does it now take? And so that is a clear, measurable and quantifiable ROI for us. But what's also really important are some of the maybe slightly more intangible benefits that we get from it. So for us, the quality of our audits is kind of number one priority for us always. Now, our ambition is to be the most trusted audit firm out there. So we have to get these things right, delivering this in a really high quality and consistent way, but in a way that time that we're saving allows our auditors to focus their time on the more judgmental, the more challenging areas of the audit. That's a real big benefit for us as well. Harder to measure, but yeah, that's the way we're kind of thinking about it across those two different buckets.
Yeah, very interesting. So you are trying to position this tool as a way to augment the auditors or the people who do the audit. And this is one of the key things we've seen as in build GenAI applications for either augment a human, not try to compare against what a human would do, just how much effort will save, or try to reinvent a solution with GenAI. So it's either of the two that we see.
Yeah,
it's working really, really well.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and this is definitely in that augment mode. It's positioned there to support the auditor. The auditor still has the ultimate accountability for making sure that those answers against the checklist are the right ones. The AI just helps them to get there more quickly. It's again a debate we've started having, and in our regulated context, as to when can we get to accuracy levels where we might be able to take the human out of the loop in certain circumstances, and we might be able to give the AI kind of a greater level of autonomy, but that's kind of experience that we have to build up to. We can't jump straight to there from zero.
Amazing. And David, what are the lessons learned from this engagement? And then we can link it to Mark on what did you learn from this engagement implementing GenAI for regulatory?
Well, I guess one key learning is I think we focused from the beginning to develop this with a focus on engineering best practices and to have it production ready right from the start. And I think that was a very good decision because it allowed us to, first of all, test the solution from the beginning, like end to end, through all different environments, having testing and everything implemented. And also it allowed us then to iterate really quickly, but maintaining the quality, right? So naturally you have to change over time, right? You have to refactor this and that. You change approach. We discussed like document retrieval and stuff like this. But having this entire pipeline of testing, integration testing, automatic deployment, all that already up and running and defined really allows us to do these changes quickly and not introducing any new issues or bugs. So that was one crucial thing, I think. And then the other, I think we discussed this at length now, the evaluation piece, really start to think about evaluation from the start, because it's quick and easy I would say, to develop something that gives you some output, but you have to make sure it's accurate, right? Especially in this environment. And then I think, yeah, Mark, you mentioned that already, like the stakeholder management, because we tried to involve them really early and to work in an agile way to manage their expectations right from the start. That, yeah, they can't really expect a shiny tool from the start, right? But we basically give them access and want to try them as early as possible to gather feedback. And I guess the same thing with the compliance teams. This solution has to be compliant with KPMG regulation and requirements.
I think for us, we could have started with a simpler use case, and we probably could have got it out there more quickly if it was A, simpler, and B, there's probably some shortcuts we could have taken with some of those engineering practices and the evaluation that David talked to. So, but for me, this use case was just as important to get the benefits from this individual use case as it was to build the foundations that can now set us up to go more quickly and in a robust way with the next use case and the next use case after that, which is one of the things we're looking at now, is how can we take the building blocks from this particular use case and the capabilities that we've built and replicate those to then go much more quickly. And we're in the midst at the moment. I challenge the team to say, well, can we take the next use case and can we go from idea to production in 6 weeks or less? And it looks like we're on track to achieving that. David's still smiling, at least at the moment. And then and I'll challenge them again. Can we go faster again than that after we do this one? So that was just as important for me in terms of the learnings that we took out of this experience. And when it comes to the regulated side, I mean, I think it's really doubling down on some of the points David made around the robustness, doing evaluations in a way that we could clearly evidence it, and we demonstrated it was a scientific approach to the evaluations that we'd really thought through. How do we measure it? How do we keep a track of it? How do we show if we make a change, what difference does that make? That's a really big thing for us. Is it's okay for us to say it works at a point in time, but it has to keep working consistently over time, and we have to be able to demonstrate the impact of any changes, also be able to go back to previous versions sometimes. So having all of that capability built in from the start is really going to benefit us going forwards to keep it compliant, not just make it compliant at go live.
Amazing. 6 weeks, you said, right?
6 weeks, yeah, we're almost there.
Okay, let's see. So David, I think it's time for them.
Yeah, so this basically just shows the source file for the Databricks asset bundles. And the only thing I wanted to show here is basically this defines the different target environments that we have. Like you see development, we have one for integration testing, UAT, production, and so on. And then we have different configuration for each of these. And we also define other resources like the models and the experiments and so on, as I mentioned before. And then basically you just do Databricks bundle deploy, right? And in this case, I would say to dev, but I could say -t to prod, and that would deploy to prod. And this is the command that actually runs on our CI/CD pipelines in Azure DevOps to deploy the code end to end to the Databricks environment. And if we look at the Databricks environment, then where I should be able to easily zoom in.
Yes.
So these are then the jobs that are being deployed, right, automatically. And these are 3 jobs. So the first 2 are basically the deployment of the models. So every time, that's basically our MLOps process. Every time we do a change to the model, these are redeployed and being run. So if we look, for example, at this one, then you see the different steps that we do. The first ones are just some setup, and then we log and evaluate the model. That means we log it to MLflow, and then we run the evaluation that we discussed before. And we can actually look at one of these experiments here. So you see, like, this is actually in the staging environment. So this is our testing environment. So where we run our tests and test deployments. And yeah, you see the different experiments being logged here. And if we, for example, look at this one here, then you see the different metrics that come out of the evaluation. You can look at individual traces, right, of the requests that we do to the language model, for example. So all that is logged, and then we do a final validation here, make sure that the metrics are being met, our requirements and thresholds that we set are being met for the model to then go to production. And then it's being registered in Unity catalog. So we have that here. So you see, here's our checklist answering model. And then you see the different versions here that we have deployed over time. And the way then we tag models to be a production model is that we use these aliases, which is a champion. The champion alias basically says this is our production model, and that's the model that is then being loaded. So that's.
I can see that one rejected. So is this because I didn't pass the evaluation step?
Yeah, that was. I guess that was a test with the model, and that model didn't meet the requirements for the accuracy, and then it gets automatically rejected, and we get notified that the model was rejected, so that we can dive deeper into why it was rejected or what happened. So that's like quickly the MLOps process. We have the same for this register or for the semantic analysis model. And then this is the actual analysis job that we run. So that is the job that is being triggered by the service management tool. So we don't run this manually here. This is all triggered through the APIs, the Databricks APIs. And if we look at one of this, so this is the entire analysis that is running, and this looks a bit more complex than what I showed in the architecture.
Yes.
But it's the same major steps here. We ingest the documents, we do the parsing here, and then we have a few gates here. If there's a choice, you can either run both features, like the semantic classification and the disclosure checklist, or you can run either, or you can basically choose.
Does the user choose this?
Yes, the user chooses when they submit the ticket in Jira, basically, and then that's a job parameter that is being passed to the APIs. And then we do the chunking. We load this into the vector search or vector database for the checklist AI. The semantic one does some processing on the reports and the sentence extraction. And then finally, we run the batch inference being done here for both the list or the semantics and the checklist AI. And then we generate the output as delta tables, which are then later being loaded into a Power BI report. And and then we generate some monitoring tables as well. So that's the.
Maybe worth saying, David, that takes typically for a large report a couple of hours to run as a batch process, which might sound like a long time, but when you think that is for a 200-300 page document with the complexity of parsing that, creating the vector index, and then anything from 1,000 to 2,000 plus questions that are individually being answered against that, and it breaks down to a couple of seconds per question, which is certainly faster than our auditors can do it.
Yeah, and maybe to add on that, like the time it takes is major. It's basically determined by the quota you have on your language model endpoints. And we're maxing out what we have available with every request.
Okay, amazing. Anything else, Mark, in terms of how is the outcome? How is the team accepting it?
Yes.
Using it?
Yeah, so where we are with it, we're in production. We are rolling it out in a phased manner. So we've been working with a first group of our audit teams who are really keen to get their hands on it. We've been working really closely with them to make sure that we understand how they're using it. We capture their feedback kind of live, as live as possible as they're using it. Feedback so far has been really positive. Favorite quote from one of the audit partners. She said she was literally wowing in the office as she was reading the AI responses, and she said it was much smarter than she expected it to be, which I think is from auditors who are typically a skeptical bunch and hard to convince, is a pretty good compliment to get. So yeah, looks really positive. so far. We're working now on how can we scale this up even further? How can we go from the 40, 50 or so audits that we've used it on now over the next few months to using it on hundreds and then ultimately thousands of audits globally. So yeah, we've still got a way to go, but really excited with how it's started off.
Amazing. Anything else you want to share with us? Anything top of mind?
I guess just to add on that, like, for the future use case, like Mark mentioned already, the 6-week use case coming up, right? I think this was also built as a kind of blueprint for future projects, right? Which allows us to kind of create a template project out of this that then allows us to be even faster in deploying new use cases, similar use cases into production.
Yes, like now you can just reuse it. You have the best practices in place. You can just build upon it. So very good. Very good job, guys. Thanks for sharing.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.